the policies changed was to be more punitive for people who were found in violation of drug statutes. It's massively racially unequal. Okay, I go back to that Justice Policy Institute report on the county studies of people being arrested for drugs. The left panel, figure 2A, shows you the survey's results by racial group for the rates of people who report either using or selling drugs in the indicated year. That's 2002. Okay? So looking at that, according to the data, 13% of whites, and these are youth, and 10% of blacks reported using illicit drugs in 2002. And 17% and 13% respectively reported selling. But here you have the arrest rates per 100,000 amongst black and white juveniles for drug offenses, and as you can see, the black rate is significantly higher. That's 17% relative to 4%. So that, again, this is not proving anything, but it's really highly suggestive, and it's interesting. Even though use and involvement with drugs is roughly the same across the groups, the people who are being punished for that involvement are disproportionately African American. Likewise here, you're seeing a similar thing in terms of racial difference. Okay, so that's the point that I wanted to make there. I do want to make this point, one of my favorite graphs in this, this paper from a few years ago by Jonathan Calkins and Peter Reuter and Taylor. These are very smart criminologists, Calkins at Carnegie Mellon and Reuter at the University of Maryland. And this is based on a study of the Rand Corporation that did a survey of street drug markets in the United States to estimate the price on the street, quality adjusted, of various illicit substances. Okay, so they, I guess, went out and bought some stuff in a systematic way across a sample of American cities, and we'll be able to construct this data set that this stuff is based on. So it's too jumbled perhaps to be able to read, but you can see three families of lines here. There's the dashed line going up. That's hospital emergency room admissions for drug-related health emergencies. Okay? And that's over the 80s to the 90s to 2000. Okay? So that's rising over this period. That solid line is an index of people in prison for drug offenses, and as we know, that's been going up. Okay? These other lines are price indices, quality adjusted for the different substances. Cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, and methamphetamines. So there are three different lines here. The cocaine and heroin lines here, the meth line here. The quality adjusted prices of all the illicit substances, with the exception of methamphetamines, which suffers a price increase spike here in the late 80s and early 90s, is going straight down for 20 years, straight down. So that the quality adjusted price of cocaine here, I believe that's cocaine, at the end of the series is roughly, it's less than a quarter of what it had been at the beginning. Okay. If interdiction and the criminal punishment of the people engaged in the transactions was shutting down the market, the price should be rising. If you were stifling the market, the price should be rising, not falling. Okay? The point is that when you arrest somebody engaged in a drug transaction, you do not dry up the demand for drugs. You simply take that particular seller out of action. If there exists a pool of potential sellers not yet active, then taking this seller out of action opens up a place for someone in the pool of potential sellers to come in. Okay? Unless you can, push up somebody's marginal cost curve somewhere, unless you can make somebody's costs get higher by what you're doing so that the prices get higher so that you're rationing people out of the market, your policy is not going to be effective at preventing people from consuming the substance. You've got an infinitely elastic supply of potential drug sellers in these cities. Okay? There's no limit on the supply of people to come into this market and take the place of someone who will have been locked up. You're going to have to lock up everybody to prevent these transactions from taking place. So what we're doing is criminalizing a class of people, but we're not actually shutting down this illicit activity that we don't want people, this activity of consuming molecules that alter your state of consciousness. The activity that people have been engaging in since before recorded history. The mushrooms, the peyote, the various things that are smoked, that are chewed, that are sucked, that are drunk, right? The alcohol. These activities of altering our consciousness through the choice to engage in certain kinds of consumptions are found in every society and have been going on forever. But we've chosen to criminalize those activities, and we've created a class of pariah in our midst. And the hypocrisy of it is almost breathtaking, isn't it? I mean, the mind boggles. We sit with our arms folded across our chest, in effect, wagging our finger, and we send out a massive mobilization, sweeping through the underside of the society, dragging people away. Okay? And yet we all go back to our dorm rooms and, or whatever it might be. Not you, but the hypocrisy is mind-boggling to me. Okay, so, enough. The threat to civil liberty might be taken into account when we're talking about this. I can't believe these data. The only reason we have these data is because of a Freedom of Information Act intervention by some very astute, shrewd lawyers in New York City. The State Assembly wanted to have a database based on the DNA of anyone who had ever been arrested in the state of New York. Your DNA would be filed away. The lawyers got this information so that they could go and testify in the State Assembly and try to prevent New York from doing that, because they said if you do that, there will be a massive infusion of DNA information about a very select part of the population, because the arrest isn't happening to everybody. It's not a random draw on the population whose DNA is going to end up in that database. And so they made an argument that it was an unconstitutional violation of the privacy of people to collect the DNA in this way. One indicator of that is the way that the police in New York City, through their public order policing, don't let anybody smoke marijuana on the street without rousting them, because that's a kind of broken windows thing. That's a kind of slow undermining of order. If the kids start smoking marijuana in the public, the next thing you know, homeless people will start setting up shop. The next thing you know, burglars will start hanging out looking for somebody to jump on. The next thing you know, abandoned cars will proliferate and there'll be broken glass. And the next thing you know, the whole place is going to go down. So you got to nip it in the bud. You got to clean it up. You got to keep those people moving. You got to not let that marijuana smoke linger too long in the nostrils of the passerby. Therefore, we observe the following phenomenon. I mean, when you look at this, these are arrests for the possession of marijuana in New York City. I mean, I find this hard to believe. Tens of thousands of arrests per year. Tens of thousands of arrests per year. I understand that a police officer gets a little bit of overtime if he has to write up the arrest. One of the theories about why the arrest numbers rise so rapidly, not only the changing policy of the Giuliani administration and all of that in New York City, but also the kind of, typically a marijuana arrest, the person isn't packing. You don't have to worry they're going to pull out a gun and shoot you. They're probably pretty clean, pretty, easily handled. And you get to spend 3 or 4 hours writing them up, and you get a little bit of overtime. So there's a kind of, I don't want to dump on the police. There's a lot of information here. The darker areas, the brown is, that's where the marijuana arrests are occurring. They did these spatial maps. I just love this, okay? They mapped out, looking at the various, police precincts in New York City, where people were being arrested for marijuana. And so you can see that a lot of arrests are going on in some very particular areas of the city. It's not spread all around. They matched that up with where the black people live in New York, okay? That's where the black people live. That's where the marijuana arrests are occurring. That's where the black people live. That's where the marijuana arrests are occurring. Okay, you can't make this stuff up. But something tells me that marijuana is actually smoked in Staten Island and Morningside Heights and in the Lower East Side. So.